everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Destination Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Stoker. I love today's show. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've got one of my oldest friends in the destination marketing industry with me today. His name is Robb Wells. He's the president and CEO of Visit Beaufort, Port Royal, and the Sea Islands. Robb, welcome back.
Thank you for having me once again, Adam. I owe a lot of the great ideas that you have shared with us through our success here in Beaufort. So I appreciate that. Anytime we get together and talk, this stuff is great.
Very, very kind of you to say, and it's been a lot of fun. You know, I do want to dive in today and give, because we've got a lot of new listeners over the last few years, and I think it's been a couple years since you and I have done an episode together, and so I think it would be really fun to catch people up a little bit on the story of how we connected. But before we do that, I'd love to know, Robb, in the last 2 years, has there been a travel memory that you've had, an experience you've had that's really stuck out to you?
Ooh, a travel memory. That's a good question. So I guess my trip from St. George, Utah, back to Savannah Airport during the middle of Hurricane Helene, and me trying to make connections and flights was a travel memory. Now, was it a fun vacation? Absolutely not. But it was a travel memory that we had, and it made me realize just how much I love a smaller airport that you can navigate, because that experience in Dallas was something. It was a little bit nerve wracking. How far I had to go and how fast I could run, and really whipped me into shape. It told me, hey, look, I need to probably hit the trail a little bit more and run some more. But at the end of the day, man, it was good. That was an interesting trip. Now, my favorite vacation trip that would be, recent mountain trips or those things where any type of trip I can go and experience the outdoors with my family is one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's hard to remember, Robb, for me at least, how long ago Hurricane Helene was. When was that?
It's 24.
Okay.
2024. So, that's the last, I'd say that's the one that still sticks in my head. I'm reminded about it quite often. We were trying to make some connections. Some flights got a little bit tight, and it kind of in the forefront now with all this going on in the travel zone with airports, and kind of remind you of where you're at and kind of some of those things. So we talk a lot about that here in the office, just about, flights and traffic, and then just how people experience destinations, and how can we do a better job here in our area.
Well, I think it's funny. We're just going to dive into philosophy here a little bit, but you really bring up an interesting and timely point, and that's the fact that right now, with all the TSA issues and things like that are going on, it's affecting people's travel experience. And it really helps you kind of gain an appreciation for the smaller airports. So I actually, this past week, flew in and out of Roanoke, Virginia, really during the peak of some of the TSA issues that have been happening. And it took me 10 minutes to get through security, and, not to rub it in the face of those that had to travel out of New York, Chicago, or some of the other major airports that have had a lot of issues, especially when it comes to TSA. I do feel very, very fortunate and have learned to appreciate the small airport. And if this continues, I actually think you're going to see regional airports attract a lot more visitors, and it's going to become a larger factor in the booking of trips. Where can I fly in and out of without having to sit in a TSA line for 2 hours?
Right. I think you're right. You're spot on as far as how people travel. And here in the Low Country of South Carolina, we happen to be surrounded by 3 relatively small airports. They do a great number in Charleston, which is about an hour and a half drive away. But Savannah, Hilton Head Airport, and then the Hilton Head Airport there on the island. All 3 are relatively small in comparison to, say, Atlanta, Charlotte, some of those other things. But it is awesome to be able to show up, get checked in, get to the gate, have some time to relax, or get off a flight, get out the gate, get home. That's all important. And I think it matters. Listen, no one wants to have or go on a trip or vacation for that matter and have a absolute rotten experience at any point during that trip. And
Yep.
it's usually those parts of the trip that usually stick out. And here I am talking about my trip from just a few years ago and what that airport looked like and navigating that, while at the same time, remembering just how amazing it was to drive to the mountains of North Carolina and just um, kind of get lost in the hills a little bit and enjoy that with the family.
Well, for those that are listening and maybe haven't heard some of your interviews that I've done with you in the past, let's give everybody an overview of the Low Country of South Carolina, because it really is a unique place with unique benefits, but also unique challenges. So, give us kind of the holistic view of Beaufort, South Carolina, and the surrounding area.
Yeah, so Beaufort is the second oldest city town in the state of South Carolina, to just shy of our neighbors to the north, which most people are familiar with in Charleston, South Carolina. So we sit almost right in the middle of Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia, along the coast of South Carolina. And we just happen to be next door neighbors to one of the more popular islands in the United States at Hilton Head Island. And so we have this unique uh, situation in which we are pressed between two great uh, southern destinations and one magnificent island escape. And Beaufort sits, and we've been able to maintain a lot of our authenticity. I know it's an overused word, but the way we live and the way we do life is the way visitors experience how our area. It's not commercialized. There's not a lot of that going on. The people you meet in the streets are more than likely going to be your, uh, local Beaufortonians that have been around here for quite some time, and they love it. They're passionate about the area. And we also represent, the northern Beaufort County, which includes resort islands such as Fripp Island Resort, Harbor Island, and then, of course, the state park gem, Hunting Island State Park, which is a barrier island beach that has zero development on it outside of a lighthouse and a keeper's cabin. And it's really beautiful. It's a fantastic, and we've embraced the environment quite a bit. And I think you see that in how clean our waterways are, how people go about life here. And it's a very fascinating place. And we find people who show up to Charleston and Savannah because that's something that's piqued their interest. Or it's a trip they've been in. They come across Beaufort. They make it a part of their itinerary, and they're more than surprised at the value they find from an experience standpoint that they get here in Beaufort. And I think that's a selling point.
Well, I had the fortunate opportunity, even before you and I met, to experience Beaufort as a visitor. Before you and I ended up working together, and Hunting Island State Park was actually one of our all-time favorite experiences, because it's like you said, there's no additional development on the island. It's just the lighthouse, and we went up to the top of the lighthouse and were able to look out all over the place, and you just kind of feel like you're on. There's very few places in the United States where you can feel like you're on the beach and there's nothing else around. With all the commercialization and development that's happened on our beaches, I think it's a pretty unique experience in Hunting Island.
I agree with you. I completely agree. As someone who grew up going to the beaches there in North Carolina, and then, of course, parts of Pawleys Island, which is just north of Charleston, which is a fun place to grow up going and experience. You go stand out in the, say ankle deep of the first set of waves crashing, right? You turn around, do a 180 and turn around, and all you see is the maritime forest with a lighthouse going above it. And that's it. That is
Yeah.
a unique experience. It's one of the feedbacks that we get a lot of is people are like, wow, this is exactly what I didn't expect. I wouldn't expect it. Most people don't expect going to the beach, turn around and be there. And it could be a beach full of people, and yet you still feel like you're there by yourself, which is
Yeah.
I think it adds to just the impact that Hunting Island has as far as visitor experience, and it very much exceeds people's expectations when they get here.
Yeah, so obviously great product, right?
Absolutely.
Really quaint experience for the visitor. Really great opportunity to not be in the hustle and bustle that you experience in other destinations. But there's some serious challenges that come along with it too. For example, your competition is Savannah, Georgia, Hilton Head, South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, possibly Myrtle Beach, although I'm not sure how much crossover you guys have in your audiences, but I'm sure there's some competition there as well. And it's like, from a funding perspective, put your budget up against some of these major destinations with major brands that are very recognizable and have all the infrastructure for a major destination. That's a pretty uphill battle to fight when you're really trying to get people to choose your destination when there's all these large destinations surrounding.
You're right. I mean, it's been something that has been a part of our strategy for years, and it's something that uh, we take into consideration each and every year. How we're doing? Are we doing it better? How are we standing out? How are we showcasing and at least getting people to take a look at Beaufort, Port Royal, and the Sea Islands at some point during their planning, right? And so, no, we don't have the budget to compete with those great destinations and the bandwidth of a Myrtle Beach. And let's not forget that there's other destinations within South Carolina that offer a tremendous, experience as well, but all competing for the a same target. And so that's where our strategy and our willingness to try something different, to do something that I would say that not every destination or DMO may be willing to look at. Maybe it's because of just the fundamental, change within their how they view promotion or advertising in general. Their willingness to use influencers as a major catalyst to tell the story. There's a lot of people that in our industry that their transitions happening. You see it more and more where they're
Hmm.
leaning on other folks to tell the story. But and then once that happens, okay, now what's our next point? Everybody does it. Everybody's using, third party sources to tell their stories. They're using trusted audiences. And we started saying, well, how do we like own our story a little bit more? How do we tell it in different ways? And I think that's where the evolution of things like the podcast has been very helpful. The Intercoastal podcast continues to be, it's moved up in our priority list, right? It's
Yeah.
was something that was used as I will use it for content generation and build up. And now it's a little higher on the list, and now it's one of our leaders. And so we use it, and it's fascinating and good on that path.
And I love the story of the Intercoastal podcast, because for those that are listening, in 2020, it was very early in 2020, before all the COVID shutdown and everything
That's
happened.
right.
I found 5 destinations that I wanted to work with as pilot destinations to explore building podcasts for tourism destinations as kind of a standard pillar of what a destination marketing organization's marketing plan should consist of. And we had lined up the idea to do a podcast, you and 4 other destinations. And when COVID hit, all the other destinations that were on that list backed out. And it was a real bummer for me, because I felt like we had a really awesome pilot program developed, and we had the opportunity to really see if this was going to be a valuable thing for the industry. And I remember calling you after hearing from all these other destinations, and you said, "No, we're committed to this. We feel like it's a great opportunity for us to try something new," and you decided to move forward. And I would love to have you maybe share that experience from your perspective. But before you do, I want to say that I've been talking a lot, and actually even my most recent keynote in West Virginia was about the importance of a challenger destination being willing to take risks. If you're not the better funded destination in the equation, you have no choice but to try something that the other one won't do. And I think the courage that you had to move forward with that, and that you have had to try a variety of different things that other destinations do or can't do or haven't done yet, I think that's a really important quality if you're going to be the CEO of a smaller destination. Because one of the challenges that I see in our space is that there's a lot of small destinations who believe that they're going to win by emulating the strategy and plan of their better funded competitors. And that is just a guaranteed losing battle. And so the fact that you were willing to stick with that idea of rolling out the podcast and trying something that hadn't been done before, I think it's a level of courage that any any destination CEO of especially a challenger destination has to be willing to have, because you're never going to out bureaucracy your larger competitor.
Right. And that's, you're exactly right. And so you here we are recording this in the middle of like March Madness, right? And so how does a mid-major or a Cinderella story begin in making a note to take out one of the blue bloods of college basketball, to use that analogy? And usually it's using a technique or a strategy that maximizes, there's a risk, because if you're shooting 3-pointers and that's your consistent realm and everybody's jacking up threes on your team, if you go 1 for 35, it's over. But it was over to begin with, right? So
Yep.
what's the harm in trying to do it? And then you get stories like UMBC taking down Virginia, and it happens on a great, everything aligns. Well, that's the same concept. While we're not just foolishly spending money chasing something, there's some ideas. What does the destination offer? Well, one of the things that we found out was that everybody has a story, right? If you look at the destination as a whole, you strip away its natural beauty, you just put it black and white, words on paper. Everybody has history, right? Everybody has, what makes them great. Everybody has a downtown. You see the similarities. And we took it a little further, and like I say, what's going to allow us to make a little bit more noise. And the podcast was a space that allowed us to do something a little different, in a space that wasn't as crowded. Now, it people have podcasts and it's out there, but what it transformed into was something a little bit more than what we realized it was at the early going. I've told this part, and even when people ask me about the podcast, our original intent was to generate evergreen content and talking about the stories of Beaufort Portal and the Sea Islands. And what it morphed into is something in which now we have a collection of stakeholders who want to tell their story within the context of that area. And they want to help tell the story of the destination. They want to talk about what, the placemakers, if you will, of the destination. What makes the destination great? And now they're telling the story. We're just playing host. That fascination, or that fascinating change for us, has been fun to watch. Now you have a lot more ownership and participatory action taking place within the podcast. And the cool thing is that it's our platform. It's not something we're renting. I think it's the word you use. It's our audience. We build it. And then over the years, we've seen the need to take that audience and maybe amplify it. And so we're putting some paid strategy behind it. And now we're doing something a little different and making it more visually appealing. But it all stems back from, this was something that our neighbors weren't doing, neighbor destinations weren't doing. It wasn't as prevalent. It was a good opportunity for us to take a risk, calculated risk, but one that we see paying off, as just, visitors showing up in the visitor center saying, oh yeah, I've listened to the podcast episode, 57 was great. This is something that helped me and my wife make a decision to add a couple extra days here in Beaufort as we were waiting to get on the Hilton Head. Fascinating. We love that aspect of it, love the feedback. And it's now what used to be once a month emails are now weekly contact with folks who listen to the podcast for one reason or another, to get, travel ideas, or they're just using it to help tell the story of the new place they just relocated to, which is fascinating as well.
I love that. I'm curious, from the time that you started, and one of the things that we're going to talk about is the next evolution of the show, which I'm really excited about. But since you started, there's been a lot of evolution. We did some trial and error. I always laugh about how my original hypothesis of how the optimal destination podcast episode should be structured, I mean, that was gone within a few weeks. I think we recognized that structure wasn't correct, right? So tell me a little bit about the evolution and what you learned along the way.
Well, we realized that the podcast, even the cadence, or first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that we did this in a fashion that we knew that we could sustain it for a certain period of time, right? So there was no reason for us to say, hey, we're going to commit to, every 3 weeks, rolling out 3 new episodes. That was not feasible. It wasn't, something sustainable long term. So we set a cadence. We've stuck to it. We haven't moved off the cadence. We release 2 a month. We record 2 a month. It's and that's been very helpful. What has changed is what we use it for. So we thought we would just use it as content on the website. And it would be something that people would pick up, like going to find out a listicle within the blog, right? Now we lead with it in a lot of respects.
How do you do that? Tell me a little bit about how you do that.
Yeah, so one of the ways that we do it, and this is something that's very helpful, is that if we are, say, actively pitching a story and there's a podcast episode, we share that podcast episode with the travel writer. If we find a writer or an influencer who's doing some work on a piece and we're working with them, we front load them with a list of the podcasts that may be interesting for them to do it. That's one aspect we do. And then it's, we actually make it part of our paid platform. Instead of sending people through paid advertisements to somewhere where they're reading more on a website, we're trying to meet them where they can consume the media that they want to consume it in the time frame. And so if that's through a podcast, they could do that directly from wherever they see the ad and campaign. And that's a little different. We're able to do that in a lot of different ways, mainly because our transaction, our conversions, all those cool terms that we use within the industry that are very important, by the way. The most important thing is somebody that we presented Beaufort, Port Royal, and the Sea Islands, that they show up. And how they got here and why they got here and what they do while they're here is all very important because our economy needs it. At the end of the day, the tourism economy is so beneficial to our port and our region because there's not a lot of industry. We do have some great businesses in the area, but at the end of the day, tourism is a big part of our economy. And so the podcast allows people who participate in that economy to tell the story, share the story in Beaufort. And then here we are seeing them convert people, actually having people play a role in getting people to town. That's the evolution of it. That's something that we did not see being a part of when we first started. Adam, you know that very well. Our early conversations were, this is going to be evergreen. It's going to feel like a blog that you can search. It's going to help us with our SEO. It does. But at the end of the day, people consume it where they consume it, and we have a voice there, and it's something that we own.
How's it helped with political advocacy?
I think that's an interesting component of it. If I was to poll the politics in the area about our podcast, some would say they know that we have a podcast, but that's about as far as it goes. But given an opportunity to share on there, we've kind of stayed out of that lane, if you will. But it does give us an opportunity to have stakeholders who have participated in it tout the praises of the CDB's efforts in telling the story and on those. So it may not be the mayor directly speaking into the podcast. It could be someone else who may share that at a different engagement. Not by design. And listen, our guests are not there for political design or anything. They're there to help tell the story of Beaufort, Port Royal, and the Sea Islands and the way that we share it. Organically, it continues to be a benefit to our area.
I love it. So, Robb, I mean, it sounds like it's been really good and valuable for you. And you mentioned at one point even that it could possibly even be more valuable than your website because of the different versatile use cases that you've had for it and all the different places that you can put it. One of the things that you hadn't had in your show previously is you guys hadn't really doubled down on the video component of the site, or of the podcast, and you've decided to make that one of the key parts of the evolution of the show. First of all, after a successful show for 5, almost 6 years, why change? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why continue to evolve? Why try something different? What is it that's prompting you to take the next evolution of the show? The websites in our industry are built for the past, not the future. And we've got a major, major problem with that. These are glorified directories that have been entirely designed to deliver bottom of funnel metrics, clicks, and impressions to the stakeholders that we serve. But we all know that at some point that house of cards is going to come crashing down. And the purpose of a DMO is to inspire travel. We lost that vision along the way when we were building these websites, and the pendulum has got to swing back. We've built, in conjunction with a company called Destination Core, a very unique content first website product that's built specifically to help engage and inspire visitors to book a trip to the destination. So if your website is at all a pain point for you, make sure you hit me up, adam@thebrandrevolt.com. We'll take a look at what you've got going on. And of course, this only makes sense for people who are building genuine inspirational content for their audiences. And if you are, you need a content first CMS and website that attracts visitation and inspires visitation to your destination. So hit me up, adam@thebrandrevolt.com.
From a visual standpoint, for a destination that has visual appeal, we wanted to incorporate the natural beauty of the area, the give people a look behind the scenes or just an actual visual of the destination that came across a little different. And so we wanted an aspect in which people are talking about a certain location, let's say Hunting Island State Park, and then being able to show that while we're having a conversation, whether it's through our promotion efforts. Maybe it's working up clips from the show to promote the show, promote the destination. We just didn't have that access. We were just strictly in audio, and I mean, we have this great natural location with just it's a beautiful place, and we wanted to infuse that a little bit more when we talk about these great places and these great people who make up this area. Now it's been a challenge as we try to get that right and let people get a little bit more familiar. More people, I think we've heard more guests say, "Well, I have a face for radio," that kind of thing, and all the jokes that go along with it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you can hear the passion of somebody has about this destination in their voice. You can now see their passion as they talk about their place that they call home.
Yeah.
And we want to fuse that with some, overlay of some of the actual sights and sounds and scenes of this low country gym. And we're excited to be able to, fuse that together. It is a work in progress. And we're continuing to refine it. And, we have some great teammates that help us get to that point, but that's the reason behind it. And it opens up a little bit more platforms. I mean, I think we all know that video and photography on social media, just one carries better than the other one, right? Well, now let's get our podcast and kind of work that same angle and see if we can't make it a good go of it. Again, I don't know if that one's as big a risk as it was jumping into the podcast space, going visual, but it's calculated in the sense that time to do it. Let's move forward. Let's commit some funding to it. And I would say that there hasn't been any pushback from our board as it relates to the investment into the podcast product because there's 100 plus episodes so they can go back and see. And now they're seeing it in their stores, they're seeing it in their hotels, they're seeing it in the visitor center, they're hearing reports, and they're listening to it. And again, it's pretty cool.
I think it was smart at the time with when you first decided to get into the podcasting idea to start with audio, kind of dip your toe and make sure that this is going to be something that's going to be defensible and a successful investment for you. And now that you have, and it becomes kind of the center of a lot of the different things that you do, it makes a lot of sense now to double down and make sure there's video. I'm not sure that going all in, including video from the get-go, would have been a smart choice with your stakeholders because they wouldn't have had a chance to see how valuable it was going to be yet. And it's a much larger investment to include video. So from a timeline perspective, I mean, sure, I think we could have added video maybe a couple years ago or something like that when these podcasts continued to demonstrate success. But the fact that you were able to get everyone to value it in the destination first, I think it's a really smart move because now when you double down and have this next evolution of the show, everybody's on board. It's not even hard to get that approved at this point because they already value what you're doing.
Well, it's been a part of the line items, right? So if we just take this down to a fiscal, aspect, the budget you've seen the line item and the development of the podcast over the years. So it's something is in there. It's a little bit easier to find the funding for. The commitment even to start investing in a little bit larger promotional budget for just single out podcasts, which is something that we've done here recently in the last year. We stuck to our guns on this being an organic growth because we wanted to show the value of it organically. And now we're at a point now where we're just continue to multiply our listeners. I think that's the added benefit. And so when people ask me about the podcast and what tips or suggestions regarding starting one or going, we always lean on, make sure that your cadence is something you can hold out and continue to do, because that's, you got to meet that expectation of a growing listener base. But if you do have the budget to promote it, don't just do this organically. I think we waited too long. That's something I reflect on quite a bit. You know that. My
Yeah.
team knows that. We should have been a little earlier to the game with that to promote it. But in the changing landscape of how people learn about the destination, we wanted to present something. They have a number of episodes they could go back and listen to. And it's always fun to have those listeners show up in market and kind of give us some feedback right, like in the flesh.
Yeah, and now, I mean, combining the evolution that you're doing to launch it as a video podcast, in addition, you're adding paid as a promotional method to get more people to see the show. What we've now unlocked is, well, with video, we can now be on TikTok. And by the way, maybe not you specifically. I know South Carolina has some interesting challenges, or at least has had over the years with TikTok. I think now that it's American owned, maybe it's different. But anyway, I don't want to get too caught up on TikTok, but it opens up the possibility for TikTok as a platform. It opens up Instagram Reels. It opens up YouTube as a channel now. And then, of course, those are all different places where you can put paid media to promote those clips to help generate more eyeballs and more listeners to the show. And it becomes more of a flywheel because of the versatility that comes from adding this video component.
Yeah, and at the same time, it starts to humanize the voices a little bit more, so they can start putting who's on there. They can see these shop owners who are on the podcast. They'll eventually see them in their operating space and say, "I saw you on the Intercoastal podcast." On the other side, it does not hurt that our stakeholders are engaged. They understand the value that we're bringing to the table for us to provide a platform for them to tell their story for their business and the way they view for Port on the Sea Islands and how they share the story, because they all play an integral role in making the visitor experience top notch. And now we're involving them in the promotion aspect of it and the storytelling, and the cycle has been great. Um, I have We've had very little negative feedback on the podcast.
Great.
It's usually been kind of tongue in cheek, funny stuff, comments made regarding, some of the comments regarding it. But for the most part, the people who show up to do the podcast to tell their story are engaged at a higher level. And from a stakeholder's standpoint, that's been more important than just about any other facet that we've done in the last 2 or 3 years, including, say a newsletter just talks about how much data is out there that we could share, which is something we do pride ourselves in as well. But the podcast has been very helpful.
Let me ask you, I've got a couple of questions related to the show. So first of all, now that you're going video, do you intend to give the stakeholder that you featured on the show, or whoever the guest is on the show, the full video content so that they can go share it on their channels and distribute it as well? What's your plan for that dynamic?
That's great. Yes. The quick answer is yes. We do that with the audio version podcast. What we found out was not everybody's distribution outlets are on par. You kind of get that in a small area. Not everybody has the best channels to do that. But when it hits and you find folks, we can see the lift come from doing that. And so the idea is to cut it up, to use the promotional aspect of the visual ads that we're running, or not ad, but the promotional videos that we're doing and the clips that we show on Instagram and YouTube, shorts, those type things, and provide those to the stakeholders so they can do the same. I don't see any negative, reason why we would not share. I only see positive stuff from sharing it.
Well, and see, I like that because the DMO is not the only organization that's starved for content, right? Like every individual organization the DMO represents also needs more content. And so when we talk about we're in an industry of what have you done for me lately, especially in the DMO world, now you have a very tangible value that you not only were able to give them a platform to share their story, but you're also giving them content to fuel their different content channels that they run on their own. That's tangible.
Well, I would encourage any size DMO to be a little bit more open with their content and sharing with their stakeholders within the community. And in doing so, you will find that you become a trusted source for that content because they are starved for content. Not everybody has the budget to go out there and produce B-roll and video, polished B-roll, and just have this aspect. And here we are just handing it over to stakeholders for them to use at a real estate trade show, right? Why? Because there's somebody at that trade show that's going to come to visit Buford. And if our images are playing a role in that, then there's this one more way that we play a role in sharing our destination, being an active participant in our economy, as not just someone who sits there and receives a certain amount of tax funding from a local ordinance. We're engaged. And so I ask our local officials all the time, do you still find value in your relationship with the CPB? And when that starts to change and go, and the answer is not something that we want to, go tell the rest of our board about, then we'll make the change. But right now we're collaborative. We want to be someone that people can count on, whether that's insight for data or market. They want them to put together an advertising campaign. Sure, we would love to be a participant. If it's just content like it is from this podcast, absolutely, we do that well.
I love it. Okay, I've got a fun philosophical question for you. It came up at a dinner after a conference fairly recently because podcasts historically have always been audio first, right? And so the question came up, if we're shifting a lot of these podcasts from audio first to video first, is this still a podcast or is this now like a YouTube show? And the reason I'm asking this question is, we're in an age now where there's podcasts on Netflix, which there's never been before, right? And now all of a sudden that's there. Spotify actually has complete video podcasts within their platform in a way that they didn't originally. So is this still a podcast or is this just a show or what is it?
That's a great question. And I think it's, I do believe it's a show when you go video, right? Just by the nature of it. You can call it what you want to, but it's still a show. I think the outlet that we use for podcasts allows people to know that there's an audio format through a traditional podcast consumption tool, right? But our goal with going video was to take the podcast and turn it into some sort of visual showcase in this particular instance. And so I would definitely be on the show side. And do you feel like I'll tell you what really got us thinking about the video aspect and just how important podcasts and going videos. When Joe Rogan has multiple YouTube channels that do Joe Rogan Experience clips, it's not directly from his show. They're just clips, people taking clips of his show and making YouTube channels out of it. I realized the power that you take a YouTube channel and you can make it visually based on a podcast series. We were probably not where we should be in doing so. And that was I know that's crazy to say, that's a strategic move, but that's one of the reasons we want to go to video. Like it's just another piece of content that's going out there that I think, you see it in the comedian space, right? Like there's comedians that I would have never heard of.
Yep.
That you see populating all over YouTube, and that's their strategy now. Great strategy. They're cutting up specials, dropping their great lines in YouTube. It's getting shared across social media. Matt Rife, I mean, he mastered it really. I mean, he's the one that comes to mind. That's something Miami Fall. Nate Bargatze, Nate does a great job. He's fantastic. And he even talks about the reason why he does it on several podcasts. I've heard him on him sharing why they do it and how it brought notoriety to it. Well, guess what? Destinations need to do the same thing, especially beautiful destinations like Beaufort, South Carolina. And this is
Yeah.
an opportunity for us to kind of own that and move forward.
It's funny. It makes me think, after you and I just having this portion of the discussion, that we may even want to consider, at least for the non-audio portion of the show, rebranding the show from the Intercoastal Podcast to maybe the Intercoastal Showcase or something like that, at least for the visual portions. That's something we may want to explore.
I definitely want to do that because it kind of goes, and it's made us think about how we're going to do some other things. And so it kind of goes through, how do we build out our marketing team in the future? And it's going to be a lot. You and I have spoken a lot about what that looks like for smaller DMOs, not for larger DMOs. And I love those guys, and they're tremendous, and they know what they need at the current time. But for a small DMO that's reliant upon having some help, from expert help, how do you build your team out? And what are you looking for from a skill set? And so I'm fortunate that one of my sales people happens to be a radio guy who is now becoming a podcast host that loves it. And it's one of his trademarks. And Daquan does a great job. That's a benefit. But now when I look at when I start filling in those next levels of the team, it's not just, can you run an ad campaign? Can you do other aspects to this content build out, what we're doing as we load this show? And so our interns have changed. We used to go down the path of hospitality management interns or a marketing intern. And now it's like, okay, you're a videographer. Perfect. This is exactly what I'm looking for this summer intern gig. We need as much B-roll as we can. So we did that last summer. And our intern was a tremendous talent. The cool thing is that he had the eye that we were looking for, and that's how his filters worked, and that's how he was able to edit. And it was more like, okay, when we talk about this destination, this is how we showcase it. And so here he is later doing workforce in the summer, and it shows up on an episode of Fox and Friends, and it shows up at Garden and Gun. Now his work is over here on a social media platform for Southern Living, and it's all because we chose to go a different pathway with our content development through an intern who absolutely is fantastic, and it's changed our game. It's how we're going to do it. And so you keep calling it a podcast or a show, and I see us morphing into telling our stories a little bit differently. There's a couple of good ones out there that I'm starting to see. I think even some of the destinations that have like video series, right? Mini series on YouTube. Smaller destinations need to figure out a way to get involved. Yes, it's a money thing, but I can tell you this from 22 years of experience in the DMO space. I will promise you that I will never be able to, in this destination, we will never be able to outspend our competitor to the north, our neighbor to the south, and our neighbor in our same county. We'll never do it. So how in the world can we stand out? We chose to take a risk with the podcast, and now we look back on it, wasn't really a risk. And it's just being first to market, doing something that made sense. It's kind of in our rural house, telling stories, right? Now we're going to do that through video, and now we're looking at adding other components. I would encourage other DMOs to find your path forward to being able to kind of wave your hand and say, hey, look over here, this destination's pretty cool. It's probably going to be a more authentic experience for the visitor in the long run to come to a smaller destination. That's my pitch for small destinations.
Well, and I think you made an important point that as just marketing and content continues to evolve, your team may need to evolve as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Or the roles on your team may need to evolve. Because I think what happens in most destinations is they know they need to do something like this. Most destinations know we should be publishing more content. We should be generating more opportunities for people to find us organically. But our current team is not structured in such a way that we can do it effectively. And some agencies, in order to do it, are really expensive to get them involved. And so all of that leads to, well, you may need to change the dynamics of your team so that you can evolve with what the destination needs from the DMO staff. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I know it's painful sometimes to either eliminate a role or modify a role, But the reality is, in order to do what's best for the organization and the destination as a whole, sometimes you need to evolve, and sometimes it happens organically when one person leaves and you don't backfill that role. You fill it with a different person or a different position, and sometimes you have to do it more deliberately. But I think it's
Yeah,
a change people need to be willing to make.
I agree because we're experiencing it right now. When when we come back from COVID, right? It's been a long time ago in this space. Um, and we thought, well, all our workers are going to be remote. What you found out is that they really just wanted flexibility. That became something very fascinating. And if you know our team, everybody on my team voted to come back in the office. That was fascinating to me. But what they wanted was they wanted the flexibility to do some other things that they may have picked up during the COVID season, right? And so that was a fundamental change to DMO spaces for us. Because now let's say somebody on my team may have picked up a side, maybe some other work that they picked up. Well, allow that flexibility to happen as long as it doesn't interfere, right? Those are some conversations we we're having. Well, now that it opened the door, what it did is it said, okay, well, that's a talent I didn't know that person had. Now I realize it, and how do we better utilize it to promote the destination? Those are things that we're looking at. I know that's not the full intent of the conversation, but I see pendulum swings. I've been here long enough to see the pendulum swing one way to the other, and now swinging back. And something tells me that while I know the conversation du jour within the marketing field is AI and what that's going to look like going forward. Is it incorporated in your day-to-day activity? I hope so. If it's not, you're behind. Obviously, everybody's incorporating, but you can see when someone is using it to the full hilt, but they haven't taken the barriers off of it either, and it looks very much like, okay, this person is using AI for everything. Well, I do believe there's going to be a space for the authenticity to still be there. And
Yep.
I think the video aspect of someone telling a story, whether it's through the Intercoastal podcast or the Intercoastal Showcase or whatever we're using, I still think that's going to be relevant going forward.
I think so too. Rob, this has been a lot of fun, and you and I have gotten to know each other so well that I'm sure we could probably do this for a couple hours, but we better wrap the show. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing some of your experience and recommendations with everybody. If people want to learn more about you or about Beaufort, Port Royal, and the Sea Islands, what's the best way for them to do so?
Absolutely. Well, first off, you need to be listening to the Intercoastal podcast. Go out there and take a listen and listen to how Daquan and our friends and neighbors here in our community showcase this beautiful place. But if that's not your element, I invite you to visit BeaufortSC.org to get the latest and the greatest of what's going on in our small community.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to leave us a rating or a review. It helps us continue to bring you amazing guests like Rob. Thanks everybody, and have a great week. Guys, have you created your profile yet on Tourism IQ? Tourism IQ has become one of the very best resources in the destination marketing industry. You can see all the latest jobs there, and Lori Farr, who many of you may know from when she was doing the travel vertical, she's the editorial director at Tourism IQ, and she puts together all the latest available jobs. She tells us where people have gone when they take a new job. It's called People on the Move. She posts the latest RFPs. We have a lot of thought leadership there from different leaders in the industry. And really, Tourism IQ has become one of the very best places for you to develop professionally in the destination marketing space. It's got all the resources you need, and it's growing every day. We have over 530 active profile users. These are people that have created profiles on the site. And then we have another 2,800 active lookers who haven't created a profile, but they are there consuming the content and revisit the site on an ongoing basis. This site is growing every day. I'm so proud of what it's become, and I need everyone to go create a profile and see the incredible resources that are being posted for our industry on a daily basis. mytourismiq.com is the URL. Please go check it out. Fill out a profile on mytourismiq.com.